All right, hi folks, this is Henry Fargus, and today we're going to be talking about coloring with words, how to create better word pictures for more sales. Okay, so we need to start out understanding that just like the actual color palette has three primary colors, there's three primary word colors, right? And those are positive, neutral, and negative. Understand that when we're talking about the color of a word, it's the word's intensity, which we're going to talk about in a second. It's intensity, it's brevity, and it's levity. Okay, so first we're going to talk about the first part, which is its intensity. Okay, so every word has varying degrees of intensity, right? So there's words that are going to be very intense on the emotional scale that are going to cause a strong emotional reaction. And there's words that are going to be neutral, that are going to be kind of boring and dull, that aren't going to be real descriptive, that are just not really going to engage the emotions that much, right? So we want to make sure we stay away from the dull words and really emphasize the emotionally charged, emotionally intense words. Now, the understanding again that the emotion can be either positive or negative, we want to stay away from neutral, depending on who you're communicating to and what part of the process they're in relation to your sales presentation. Something I recently learned from a mentor of mine is that you want to code leads away from pain instead of towards pleasure, which oftentimes we're taught to just, try to emphasize the benefits and emphasize the pleasure that the person wants to get to. But I recently learned from my mentor, Myron Golden, again, that we as humans, we don't trust people we don't know to lead us towards pleasure, but we trust them enough to lead us away from pain. And with that said, we're going to get into now the elements of coloring with words, okay? So the first thing is a word's intensity, right? And its intensity is determined by its emotion, its explicitity. I don't know if that's a word, but how explicit it is and how engaging it is, okay? So intensity, let's talk about emotional, right? You want to make sure that and of course you'll know where in the process of your sales presentation this is, but the emotions you want to invoke are the ones using words that are the most highest intensity that you can use for the emotion you're trying to invoke, right? You don't want to be like, so let's say for example the word be let's say for example to you, if you tell someone, you know uh, uh, precaution, right? That's not the same as saying stop or don't or warning, right? Those are much more intense, they're much more direct. A word like precaution or watch out for or things along those lines, they're okay, but they're a bit too neutral because they don't generate a sufficient of an emotional impact to actually communicate what you want to do, what you want to communicate, and to get the people in a state of mind and emotion where you want them to be. So it's important that you use emotionally charged words, whether positive or negative, depends again where at the person is in relation to the relationship with you. The second thing is the words, you want to be explicit with your words. And I'm not talking about X-rated or R-rated kind of stuff. No. To be explicit means to be extremely clear or precisely clear. And that's important because the more you learn to get explicit, it means the more efficient you can become in your words, which means you have to use less words, which is important, and we'll talk about in the next part here, which is the brevity. But you want to be explicit with your words because also why? Because the explicit words, which tend to be more direct, are also more emotionally charged. Okay, so you see how they fit together, right? And the third element of having of a word's intensity is it's engaging, right? It has to be engaging. It has to be words. The intensity has to trigger the emotion, right? The explicitness of the word has to paint the clear image, but then the engaging, how engaging the words are, is what determines your potential client's mind to engage in visualization in their mind of them actually being in the situation you're presenting them, right? So you want to make sure that the words you use are engaging to the person as well. So that's word intensity. Now we're going to talk about word brevity, right? Because an underlying principle of all persuasive communication is effectiveness and efficiency. Efficiency is using only the words necessary to convey the message. Efficiency is using those words in a way to create the desired result, right? So those are the two main core principles in effective communication and persuasive communication. And now we're going to talk about how that incorporates that to coloring with words with the word brevity. The word brevity as far as syllables. And this can be summarized in just using the shortest words you can, right? You don't want to use big words, because big words is one, each syllable represents time and data, which means it's a higher mental bandwidth that the person has to process to understand what you're saying, right? Which causes a delay, and which means it could be more confusion. So you want to be brief. You want to use words that have the least syllables possible. In other words, use short words, small words. You also want to look at the words, at the sounds, right? You want to use, if possible, try to use alliteration in your words. Try to keep consistent with a certain sound for several reasons. Because one, it makes it easier for your reader or your listener to digest. It makes it easier for them to actually pay attention, and it just sounds a lot smoother if you use alliteration in your conversation, because it keeps it flowing smoothly, right? So you want to keep that in mind as well. And then lastly, under the brevity of the words, you want to use the right silences, right? You want to make sure, because silences are strategic, right? Pauses are strategic. So you want to use them sparingly, or you want to use them correctly, which is you want to pause enough to give the person time enough to digest, or to at least absorb what you are saying, but not so much time that they're going to start getting lost in their own thoughts. Okay. And so you got to be very strategic with the pauses that you use, because again, you don't want to extend your communication. You want it to be as brief as possible and as concise as possible. Okay. So that's word brevity. Now we're going to talk about the word levity. And the word levity actually means to take a serious matter with lightheartedness or with humor, right? Some definitions even push it to the side of disrespect, but that's not where we want to go. We just want to keep things lighthearted, humorous, and just take the edge off of the seriousness of an issue. So if you're talking to someone about a very serious issue, you want to contrast this little bit of lightheartedness, a little bit of humor with the intensity of the emotional intensity that you shared in the previous words. Okay, it creates kind of a contrast, right? So whether it's a topic of seriousness, which you want to drop little grains of humor or lightheartedness, because the point is you want to provide that, because what this aspect of the levity does in the communications is it provides hope, right? So the intensity of the emotion, the word intensity, puts the listener in a position where they see themselves and they feel themselves more so in that situation where they're at, right? And then using the correct levity lets them know that the intensity lets the listener know that you can identify with them, or they can identify with you, that they can relate to you because you understand their pain. And so now the levity, what it does is it communicates a bit of hope, right? It communicates a bit of possibility, right? To move away from the pain that was expressed and communicated earlier, that they want to get away from. So seriousness, or if it's sadness, you also want to take it with a little bit of lightheartedness. You want to, again, the point of this brevity is to add a bit of hope in your communications, because you don't want to be all doom and gloom, because then that's going to put the person in a very depressed state of mind, and a depressed state of mind doesn't purchase good products. And so you want to make it enough on the intensity to where they're like, but then with the levity, you want to bring it back up and provide that escape, that hope, so that they can feel that there is an actual way to get out of that pain and despair where they're at. And then also with your levity, you want to poke fun a little bit at what it would be like if they're in the sameness. So if they decide to do nothing, if they decide to not take the action that you are asking them to take, then what you're going to want to do is, with those words, you're going to paint a little bit of more pain, but in a bit more lighthearted way. That's gonna let them know, that'll help them see what will happen if they stay in the circle of sameness, right? Or as my mentor Myron says, in the circle of uncomfortable comfort. So it's very important that you understand that when you're painting with words, you want to understand the word intensity, which is how emotionally charged the word is, how explicit it is, and how engaging it is. You also want to keep in mind the word brevity. You want to make sure that it's as short as possible. So that means as few syllables as possible, as few sounds or using similar sounds as possible. And also this using silences correctly, right? And then finally, again, the word levity, meaning wanting to take with a bit of lightheartedness and just enough of hope, right, to instill in any situation of seriousness or any situation of sadness. And then you want to show them again what it would be like if they stayed in the sameness. So I hope this was helpful to you. Again, there's a lot more, and just like the palette of colors, each word, there's varying degrees of intensity. So just like you have a dark, like let's say a deep blue, royal blue, you have a light blue as well. Well, it's the same thing with the words, right? There's different words that have different intensity of emotion, and it's a pretty safe rule of thumb to say that you want to use the most emotionally charged words, and then take that to a place where at the end with the levity you can provide hope for them to get out of that pain that they are establishing. So I hope this was helpful, and go ahead and become Picassos of word painting. So I'll see you guys later.